A father binds his son to an altar, a blade raised above his head. A kingdom watches as rebels hang lifeless from wooden beams, their bodies a warning to others who might dare resist. Empires rise and fall, leaving cities in ruins and families in despair. These were the brutal realities of the ancient world, where survival often meant submission, and justice was a word twisted to fit the will of the powerful. It is within this turbulent history, surrounded by bloodshed, conflict, and desperate cries for salvation, that one man's life would ignite a revolution. A man who lived not in luxury, nor on a throne, but among fishermen, laborers, and outcasts. His name was Jesus of Nazareth. The world Jesus was born into was dominated by the Roman Empire, a vast and merciless force that controlled every corner of life in Judea. Roman legions patrolled dusty roads lined with crosses, symbols of both fear and domination. Tax collectors demanded payments from impoverished farmers, lining the pockets of faraway rulers. For the Jewish people, this oppression wasn't just political, it struck at the very core of their faith. The Jewish population of Judea was fragmented into opposing factions. Pharisees, experts of the law, deeply concerned with religious purity, but often accused of hypocrisy. Sadducees, wealthy aristocrats who controlled the temple and cooperated with the Romans for their own gain. Zealots, fierce nationalists determined to overthrow Roman rule, often through violence. Essenes, isolated communities, living in the wilderness, waiting for divine intervention to restore Israel. Amid this fractured world, there was one unifying hope: the arrival of the Messiah. The word Messiah comes from the Hebrew Mashiach, meaning anointed one, a king chosen by God to rescue his people. The ancient prophecies spoke of a figure who would defeat oppressors, bring justice, and rebuild the kingdom of Israel. But expectations ran high. The Messiah was envisioned as a warrior, a leader who would shatter Roman chains and reclaim the land promised to Abraham's descendants. Yet, when Jesus of Nazareth emerged, he was nothing like what they had imagined. He did not march with swords or call armies to his side. He walked barefoot, spoke of peace, and dined with sinners. Who was this man, truly? And how could someone so humble claim a place among kings and prophets? The answers to these questions take us on a journey through mystery, faith, and history, a journey that begins here. He wasn't born in a palace surrounded by servants, but in a dusty, forgotten village where life was harsh and simple. Nazareth, a town so insignificant that one man would later ask, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" John 1 verse 46. Jesus grew up in the hills of Galilee, an area far removed from the wealth and influence of Jerusalem. It was a region of farmers, craftsmen, and fishermen, people who worked from sunrise to sunset just to survive. Life was rugged. Families lived in small, stone houses, lit by oil lamps and warmed by the company of animals they kept indoors at night. As a boy, Jesus would have learned the trade of his father, Joseph, who was a tekton, a carpenter or stonemason. His hands would have been calloused, his back strong, and his days spent building homes or tools for others. This humble beginning tells us something remarkable: Jesus knew the struggles of ordinary people because he lived them himself. But Jesus was not just a man of labor, he was a man of words. At the age of 30, he began teaching, walking from village to village with a message that turned the world upside down. He spoke of loving one's enemies, forgiving those who wrong you, and serving the poor. To a people living under oppression and injustice, this was a radical message. In a world where an eye for an eye was the norm, Jesus said, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Matthew 5 verse 44. These teachings weren't just words, they were lived out. Jesus spent time with tax collectors, men despised for collaborating with the Romans. He healed lepers, touched the untouchable, and gave dignity to the broken. Women, often overlooked in ancient society, found respect and compassion in his presence. And yet, Jesus never held a position of power. He owned nothing. He traveled on foot, slept under open skies, and relied on the generosity of strangers. It was this simplicity, this paradox, that confounded both the powerful and the poor. Who was this man who spoke with such authority but lived with such humility? And why did his words ignite so much love and so much hate? The mystery of Jesus is not just in what he said, but in who he chose to be. A humble teacher, a friend to the outcast, and yet someone whose life changed the course of history. But what if the greatest question isn't just who he was, but who he is to you? If you're as fascinated as we are by these untold truths, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for the next part of this journey. For 3 years, Jesus walked the dusty roads of Galilee and Judea, teaching, healing, and transforming lives. Crowds gathered wherever he went. Some came for hope, others out of curiosity, and a few to accuse him. Yet, one thing was certain: no one remained indifferent to Jesus of Nazareth. His words carried a weight unlike any other. He spoke in parables, short stories with profound spiritual truths that pierced through hardened hearts. One of the most famous, the parable of the prodigal son, tells of a rebellious child who abandons his father's home, squanders everything, and returns in shame. But instead of punishment, he is welcomed back with open arms, a shocking depiction of forgiveness in a society built on justice and law. The son represents humanity. The father symbolizes God. Jesus used stories like these to challenge both the religious elite and the common people, urging them to rethink their relationship with God and each other. But not everyone celebrated his message. The religious leaders, the Pharisees and Sadducees, saw Jesus as a threat. To them, he was a radical who questioned their authority, embarrassed them in public debates, and exposed their hypocrisy. When Jesus said, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and self-indulgence." Matthew 23 verse 25. He wasn't just criticizing individuals, he was attacking a system. A system that prioritized rituals over compassion, appearance over integrity. The miracles he performed, healing the blind, raising the dead, feeding thousands with a few loaves and fish, only deepened their anger. These acts were undeniable, yet they refused to believe. Instead, they plotted. The conflict reached its breaking point during the Jewish Passover festival. Jerusalem swelled with pilgrims, a city buzzing with anticipation and tension. Jesus entered the city, not as a king in splendor, but riding a humble donkey. Crowds cried out, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." It was a moment of triumph and a warning. The Pharisees and Sadducees saw the masses rallying around him and feared an uprising that would draw Roman retaliation. In the shadows, one of Jesus' closest followers, Judas Iscariot, made a decision that would seal his fate. For 30 silver coins, the price of a slave, he betrayed Jesus, leading the soldiers to arrest him under cover of night. The following hours were brutal. Jesus was beaten, mocked, and falsely accused in a rush trial before the religious council. Then, he was handed over to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, who found no fault in him but caved under the pressure of an angry crowd shouting. The crucifixion was the most humiliating and agonizing form of execution in the ancient world. It was designed to strip away dignity and inflict the maximum amount of pain. Jesus, the man who spoke of love, who healed and forgave, was nailed to a wooden cross like a criminal. Statistically, crucifixion was common under Roman rule. Historians estimate that thousands were executed this way, yet one man's death on a hill called Golgotha stands apart. As he hung there, bloodied and exhausted, he uttered words that stunned those watching. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23 verse 34. In his final moments, Jesus chose forgiveness over condemnation, mercy over vengeance. It was an act that defied human logic, a love so profound it echoed through history. If the story ended here, Jesus would have been remembered as a tragic hero, a martyr for a noble cause. But this was only the beginning. 3 days later, something happened that would turn his death into the most debated, celebrated, and mysterious event of all time. Before we uncover this next chapter, take a moment to reflect. How could a man from an obscure village, who died a criminal's death, leave such an indelible mark on humanity? For those who witnessed the crucifixion, the story of Jesus seemed to end in darkness. His disciples scattered, their hopes shattered. The man they believed to be the Messiah, God's chosen one, was gone, humiliated and executed like a common criminal. But what came next defied every expectation, every law of nature, and every whisper of doubt. 3 days after his death, the city of Jerusalem was still buzzing with tension. Roman guards stood watch over Jesus' tomb, a heavy stone sealing its entrance. The religious leaders, afraid of rumors that his followers would steal the body, demanded the tomb be guarded. But none of them, neither the soldiers, nor the priests, nor Pilate himself, could have anticipated what happened next. At dawn on the third day, several women, including Mary Magdalene, went to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body. What they found was shocking. The stone had been rolled away. The tomb was empty. In that moment of confusion and fear, a voice broke the silence. A figure stood before them, glowing with an otherworldly light. "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, he is risen." Luke 24 verses 5-6. The women fled, their hearts racing, carrying news that would change history. Jesus was alive. The claim of resurrection was not a quiet rumor, it spread like wildfire, dividing opinions and igniting debates. Jesus began to appear, not as a ghost, but in a physical, resurrected form. He appeared to Mary Magdalene, calling her by name. He walked with 2 men on the road to Emmaus, explaining the scriptures until they realized who he was. He stood among his disciples, showing them the wounds in his hands and side. He appeared to over 500 people at once, 1 Corinthians 15 verse 6, a staggering claim even by ancient historical standards. For many, it was unthinkable. How could someone rise from the dead? Skeptics have tried to explain it away for centuries. Was the body stolen? Were the appearances hallucinations? Yet, none of these theories hold against the overwhelming accounts of eyewitnesses. What's even more astonishing than the resurrection itself is its immediate impact on his followers. These same men who ran in fear during the crucifixion suddenly became bold and fearless. Peter, who had denied Jesus 3 times, began to preach publicly about his resurrection, even at the cost of his own life. The disciples traveled to distant lands, facing persecution, imprisonment, and death to spread one message. Jesus is alive, and his resurrection changes everything. The resurrection of Jesus didn't just change a handful of lives, it created a movement that outlived empires, transformed cultures, and shaped the course of human history. Today, over 2 billion people across the globe follow Jesus, making Christianity the world's largest faith. The Bible, which records his life, remains the most widely read and distributed book of all time. Art, literature, and music, from Michelangelo's paintings to Bach's compositions, were inspired by his life, death, and resurrection. How could one man, from a forgotten village, executed in the most humiliating way, cause such a ripple effect? The resurrection is not just a historical event, it's a challenge. If Jesus conquered death, then everything he taught carries eternal significance. His life, death, and return invite us to consider one profound question. What if it's true? What if the story of Jesus is more than just history? What if it's more than religion or tradition? For centuries, his life has been dissected, debated, and celebrated. Scholars have written thousands of books, skeptics have tried to deconstruct his influence, and believers have shaped entire civilizations in his name. Yet one undeniable fact remains: the legacy of Jesus Christ is unlike that of any other figure in human history. But why? Why does this man, born in obscurity, crucified as a criminal, and celebrated by so many, still matter today? Jesus was, and still is, a paradox. He was humble, yet he spoke with the authority of kings. He lived with nothing, yet he promised riches beyond imagination, riches not of gold, but of the Spirit. He was gentle, yet his presence shattered religious and political systems. Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, a statement so radical that it would cost him his life. He didn't just teach about morality or philosophy, he made audacious statements that demanded a response. "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." John 14 verse 6. These were not the words of a simple teacher or philosopher. They were either the claims of a madman, a liar, or the truth of someone truly divine. And that's the tension that has surrounded Jesus' legacy ever since. You cannot remain neutral about him. After Jesus' resurrection, his followers, ordinary men and women, risked everything to carry his message. They preached to kings and beggars, philosophers and farmers. In the face of brutal persecution, they refused to deny what they had seen and heard. Stephen, the first Christian martyr, was stoned to death while praying for his executioners. Peter was crucified upside down because he felt unworthy to die in the same manner as Jesus. Paul, once a violent opponent of Christianity, became its most influential voice, traveling thousands of miles to spread the gospel. Within a few centuries, the Roman Empire, the very force that crucified Jesus, embraced his message. Temples to false gods were abandoned, and crosses, once symbols of shame and death, became symbols of hope and redemption. Even today, the teachings of Jesus echo in our moral and legal systems, our art, and our understanding of compassion and forgiveness. His influence has shaped hospitals, universities, charities, and the very idea that all human life has inherent value. But here's the most remarkable part of Jesus' story: it's not just about history, it's about you. When Jesus walked the earth, he spoke to individuals. He looked into the eyes of the sick, the poor, and the broken, and he called them by name. He healed their wounds, restored their dignity, and offered them a life that was richer and deeper than anything the world could provide. And his message hasn't changed. Jesus doesn't ask for empty rituals or mindless belief. He invites us into a relationship. A relationship that transforms, redeems, and gives purpose to every moment of our lives. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11 verse 28. For the skeptic, the question is simple: what if it's true? What if Jesus' life, death, and resurrection were real? What does that mean for you? For the believer, the challenge is even greater. Are you living as though it's true? For over 2,000 years, the name Jesus of Nazareth has lingered at the crossroads of history, faith, and controversy. He was loved and hated, followed and betrayed, worshipped and mocked. Kings have fought wars in his name, while countless men and women have died for refusing to deny him. But here's the inescapable truth: no one can erase his presence from history, or from the human conscience. The question we've been exploring isn't just about who Jesus was. It's about what you choose to do with him. Because the legacy of Jesus isn't confined to ancient texts or dusty history books. His story still confronts us today, asking hard, uncomfortable questions. What if he wasn't just a teacher, but the very truth he claimed to be? What if the resurrection isn't a myth, but a historical event that changes everything we think we know? What if every word he spoke about forgiveness, love, purpose, and eternity was true? You can ignore these questions. Many do. But even by ignoring him, you're choosing. Because neutrality is impossible. The world has tried for centuries to bury Jesus under skepticism, politics, and culture. And yet, he remains. Think about this: no other figure in history has caused this much division, yet inspired so much unity. No other person has been rejected by empires, yet embraced by the broken. A man born in a forgotten corner of the world, executed as a criminal, now has billions who claim to know him. If Jesus was nothing more than a man, why do his words still carry weight? Why are his teachings still debated in universities, courts, and homes across the world? Why does his influence refuse to fade? Perhaps it's because his message still holds something we desperately need, a truth that modern life cannot silence. A truth that breaks through doubt, fear, and pride. If you've followed this story until now, you've heard the evidence. You've seen the ripple of his life through history. But this isn't about what others believe. It's about you. If Jesus truly rose from the dead, if he truly is who he claimed to be, then nothing matters more than this. What will you do with Jesus? Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Because ignoring the question doesn't make it go away. It lingers in the quiet moments of life. It whispers when the noise fades, when the world stops. Who is he? And who is he to you?